What's up, everybody? It's your boy Al, coming to you from Houston, Texas. So we received some startling news in the boxing world last week, and that is that come the start of 2024, Showtime will be dropping boxing from its lineup. Boxing will no longer be broadcast on Showtime. It has been broadcast on Showtime for many, many years. Going back to the days of Mike Tyson and before, I can remember some of the great fights I've seen on Showtime, getting the Showtime Don King pay-per-view cards headlined by Julio Cesar Chavez. You would see some of the greats like Terrible Terry Norris, Julian the Hawk Jackson, Gerald McClellan. You would see people like Azuma Nelson, young Felix Trinidad. I remember watching him stop Boy Campos, knowing that realizing he was going to be a great superstar on one of those great Don King Showtime cards. There have been great Showtime fights throughout the years. So this is for myself, somebody as myself who's been a boxing fan for all of my life. Sad news that boxing will no longer be carried on Showtime. We already lost a few years ago. We already lost boxing on HBO, one of the premium cable channels. For the longest, most of my life, if not all of my life, boxing has been carried on those two premium cable channels from its inception. HBO and Showtime have carried, depending on what the promoter, who the promoter is, have carried boxing, big fights, Mike Tyson, Muhammad Ali, Sugar Ray Leonard, Thomas Hearns, all of those guys throughout the years have been on HBO and Showtime. Maybe not Ali, I think it before. Ali was retired before HBO and Showtime came into its inception. But for me, it's just for nostalgia's sake and just what I'm used to. It's sad. It was already sad when we lost HBO. But now that boxing will be carried on none of the premium channels, there are different schools of thought on what's going on here and why it's happening. Let's talk about why it's happening. One of the reasons why a lot of people say that it's happening is because of the lack of big marquee names to make it worth the while of these giant companies to be able to carry boxing. I can tell you watching HBO boxing in the last couple of years was pretty boring. Once Mayweather retired, or once Mayweather jumped to Showtime and a lot of the big names started retiring, there was just a lot of who is this guy? Who is this guy? Who is this guy? And it just wasn't bringing in the numbers because the superstars, there weren't a lot of superstars. One of the things that I've been used to throughout my life is there being a lot of superstars in boxing outside of just the main guys, right? The Sugar Ray Leonards, the Mike Tysons were the main guys. The Oscar De La Hoya in the 90s were the main guy. Floyd Mayweather, even in his career, he was the main guy, and Pacquiao, main guy. But even throughout their careers, there were still other superstars in boxing. Boxing has always thrived on that. It's always survived on that. Not just having one big star or two big stars. It's always survived on having a multiplicity of stars. And what I started to see at the height of, or at the beginning of HBO's decline in boxing was just a lot of guys, right? Just not superstars. The fights weren't spectacular. The fighters weren't spectacular. There wasn't anything to capture the imagination of the public. And when you're HBO and you've got Game of Thrones and you've got The Wire, and demographics are changing, people are changing, their interests are changing, and you've got all of these shows, and you've got True Blood, and you've got what's another HBO show? There have been a number of them. The Sopranos, Entourage, and you've got all these shows that are drawing these kind of audiences. You better make sure that when it's boxing, it's not just the hardcore boxing fans, that it's at a stage where the boxers can transcend the sport and gain the imagination and the attention of someone who may not have wanted to watch boxing before. That's what Muhammad Ali, Sugar Ray Leonard, Oscar De La Hoya, Mike Tyson, all these guys did. They captured not just the attention of the hardcore boxing fan, but they captured the attention and the imagination of people who were not necessarily boxing fans, who just because of the hype, excitement, and spectacular performances that they would see, said, wow, I got to catch this guy. I'm not necessarily a hardcore boxing fan, but I got to watch this guy when he fights. So that's one of the things that has always helped places like HBO, networks like HBO and Showtime survive. So I think what this shows us, number one, what it means for boxing is that there is a decline in superstar talent. There is a decline in superstar attraction. We've got Canelo. As great as Terrence Crawford is, Terence Crawford is one of the greatest fighters of all time, but he's not a transcendent superstar. The Showtimes and HBO have always survived on the transcendent superstars in the sport of boxing. And I think what HBO cutting boxing loose and Showtime not cutting boxing loose is telling us is there are not enough transcendent superstars in the sport to carry for them to make it worth the while of the networks to carry boxing. Sure, we've got great fighters. We've got Canelo. We've got Crawford. Spence is still a great fighter. We've got Lomachenko, I still think is a great fighter. Shakur Stevens, Devin Haney. We've got Pitbull Cruz. We've got Tank Davis. We've got a lot of great fighters, but these great fighters are primarily known inside the boxing community and not outside of the boxing community. And I think what we need and what we've always needed and survived on is boxing. The excitement of boxing and boxers drawing outside audiences to boxing, which kept HBO and Showtime loyal to boxing. All right, and then the ability to capitalize on those big pay-per-view cards, right? Showtime pay-per-view, HBO pay-per-view cards. When the big-time fighters come together and fight for a pay-per-view card, it's always been worth their while to hold those cards. So I think that one of the biggest thing we need to take away from the fact that Showtime is now dropping boxing is that it's not what it used to be. And let's be clear, it's not what it used to be. A lot of these networks are under pressure to stay afloat, right? Because we've got streaming services, we've got just a lot of different things people like to do. Just YouTube. We've got all these different things now that people like to do. My wife was telling me as a school teacher how her kids don't even watch television. They can't even talk about a TV show with her that they watch. They watch YouTube channels and TikToks, and they don't even watch. She can't even talk about a show that they share a commonality with. Back in the day, you could at least talk to your teacher about how you and the teacher both watch Full House or Family Matters or something like that. But now you have a generation that they don't even touch cable or even streaming services. They stay away from streaming services. They're all about this, they're all about the internet. So the landscape is changing, and boxing has got to be big enough to be able to sustain. It's got to be big enough to be able to sustain an audience that allows these networks to stay loyal to them. Now, a lot of people are talking this. Oh, this is a good thing. That means boxing can now go to multiple streaming services, and it can do this and it can do that. Yeah, but let's be clear. Let's be honest. What kind of infrastructure and financial backing do some of these streaming services have? Because without HBO and without Showtime, long gone will be the days where boxers can make $20, $30, $40 million a fight. The Mayweather type numbers. I know we've seen, things happening like, Logan Paul and the Paul brothers coming into boxing and making more money than, great fighters have been fighting for years. That's another reason why a lot of these networks may feel like it's time to cut boxing loose, because you have people that don't even box and coming into boxing and making more money than boxers. So they're saying, hey, what's the use of us being, loyal to real boxers when you got these clown shows running around making all this money because people are so attracted to clown shows. And so you've got a lot of that going on as well. But you have a lot of people saying that, it's good for boxing to be able to go to different places. You got a lot of people like Bernard Hopkins and a lot of fighters and promoters who had problems with HBO and Showtime saying, it's good that they don't have boxing. It's good that they don't have boxing anymore. But that was your personal issues and all of that. And the fact that you've got your wealth, you've still got a lot of fighters now who don't know, who their future is uncertain. They've been, they've been, Showtime fighters, and now they have to look for new homes. And let's be clear, boxing is a sport that is in trouble. Let's be clear, it is a sport that's in trouble. You've lost your major network in HBO. You've lost your major network in Showtime. You've lost Olympics, which was how young fighters became superstars before they ever touched the squared circle as a professional. Think about this. Your Muhammad Ali's, your Sugar Ray Leonard's, your Oscar De La Hoya's, your Roy Jones's, your Shakur Stevens, your Rocky Juarez's. These guys became superstars in America during the Olympic Games, which is where a lot of people become famous. You know, your Mary Lou Rettins, your Edwin Moseses, your Florence Griffith Joyners, your U.S. hockey team that beat the Soviets. A lot of these guys, you know, and a lot of these gals become famous at the Olympics. They become USA darlings. They become country heroes. They get Wheaties boxes and endorsements and all of these things. And along with that were the boxers, you know, who gained the imagination of the American public by representing their country and bringing home the gold. And then when they would go pro, that audience that may not have watched boxing or may not have been boxing fans hardcore like somebody like myself, because they saw this young kid represent their country so well in the Olympics, they would now watch that person as a pro, and follow their career. And that brought a lot of people to boxing. But now the Olympics, boxing and Olympics is gone. So that whole aspect is gone. You know, we just imagine, to equate to what it would be like, just imagine in boxing, I mean, in football, if that was no college sports, if that would just be a draft of players, and these guys would just be people that you never heard of. It wouldn't be the guys who came in and went to the NCAA and became superstars in college and quarterbacked their teams to national championships and ran for 2,000 yards and caught for 1,500 yards in a season. That would allow you to be able to see them in college and then go to the pros and become superstars. Just imagine if you didn't see kids come from college and you know, wreck shop in the NCAA tournament and become superstars in the Final Four and go to the pros. Just imagine if these guys just came out of nowhere and you just had to learn who they were without any history. That's the stage that's being set here in boxing, with no Olympics and now no HBO and Showtime. Now, I know that, again, the landscape is changing because social media contributes a lot to the popularity of people. You look at somebody like Ryan Garcia, who was more popular than 2-3-time world champions because of social media. You look at the kid who just drafted by San Antonio, Victor Wembanyama, or whatever his name is, or somebody like Zion Williams. They became so famous because of their YouTube highlights or their internet highlights that made people ask, who is this? And so for, again, like I said, the landscape is changing, and you might not need a lot of these things to allow somebody to become famous as they once did. But for a sport like boxing, to lose the Olympics and to lose HBO and Showtime, that's problematic. For somebody like myself, that's problematic because you're losing too many ways for boxers to become famous, and to be able to be sustained by taking away these entities. Now, here is another problem with that. You may say, well, yeah, you have, just like you just said, you have the internet and all of these other entities that will allow people to know who boxers are, just like there is in basketball, with a lot of players being known without having to go to college and just going to college 1 year. Yeah, that may be true. But for someone like myself, it's allowing the wrong people to be recognized. It's not allowing the prodigies to be recognized, the great prodigy fighters to be recognized who are coming along and who may be great in the near future. It's allowing, you know, clown shows like the Paul brothers and two former NFL players to get in the ring and fight each other and you know, make a boatload of money. And the kid who started as an amateur, fought 200 amateur fights, you know, is 23-0, and is doing it the traditional way, can't get any love because too many people are in love with the handsome kid on YouTube or TikTok who can't fight, but he's got a lot of girls that like him. And so you have this whole conundrum going on and things just, you know, getting out of order. And I understand, you know, time goes on. Everything's not going to stay traditional forever. Things always change. So I'm aware of that. But for me, I'm just looking at boxing and saying, where do we go from now? Where do we go from here? What do we do? I mean, there aren't, you know, many superstars on the horizon. I said this on the Big Fish podcast. There aren't a ton of superstars on the horizon that would keep the boxing publics and go outside of the boxing public to draw in a lot of people. I love Shakur Stevens, but Shakur Stevens is a technician. And the general public isn't attracted to technicians. It wasn't attracted to Mike Tyson because he was a technician. It was attracted to Mike Tyson because he was sawing people's heads off. Even Sugar Ray Leonard, who is a technician, but he had so much flash and so much so much excitement, and he could finish you. He had spectacular knockouts too. And so people like that were able to draw the imagination of the public and people who were not generally just regular boxing fans, and bring them to the sport. So I'm looking at the sport now, and I see all of these guys. I see, we have a Tank Davis who knocks people out. We have Canelo, who's still a huge superstar. But I just look at losing these entities that we're losing and losing the star quality that we're losing. And I just don't think it looks good for boxing. Yeah, we have all of these other outlets and streaming services like that, but will they have the infrastructure and the stability and the backbone to be able to hold boxing up like HBO Showtime has? Do we need to go back to the networks? Are the networks ready to go back to showing boxing? ABC used to be Wild World of Sports. I know Fox tried to have boxing for a minute. ESPN, or is ESPN going to jump in this thing and be more prominent? And ESPN hasn't been nice to boxing. They don't show boxing at all. A lot of the ESPN radio shows don't talk about boxing at all. Mike and Mike in the morning, Colin Cowherd, none of these people really talked about boxing when they were, had their prominent radio stations, and even now TV shows. They don't talk about boxing. They don't promote boxing. They haven't for a while. I do believe that one of the reasons why that is because Floyd Mayweather turned a lot of people off. A lot of people said, if I got to give boxing attention while that guy's the best boxer in the world, I'm not giving it attention, because there were a lot of character issues with Mayweather. And let's talk about that. Not just Floyd's character issues, but the fact that one of the reasons why this may be happening is because of the trend that Floyd Mayweather said. Floyd Mayweather made more money in boxing than any other boxing in history. But that may be about to come back and bite people in the butt. That may be about to come back and bite boxing in the butt. Because let's be clear, one of the reasons why Floyd Mayweather made so much money is because he played the Jack Johnson angle. He became such a hated figure that people funneled out money to pay for a fight, to watch him, the possibility of watching him lose. He always fought a fighter who people loved, who was on the other side of his career, and people prayed and hoped that fighter would beat him, and they would funnel out money like suckers to watch their fighter who they were looking for to beat Floyd Mayweather lose. And I believe that a lot of people are bitter because of that, are bitter towards him and bitter towards boxing. And I think a lot of people have been turned off of boxing. And I think also because we have so many boxers now trying to do what he did, make the most money with the minimal risk, which I'm all for. But you got to fight some dogs out there. You got to have some dog fights every now and then. Floyd Mayweather made the most money with minimal risk, and that's rubbed off on a lot of these fighters. And because of that, until recently, you saw a lot of great fighters not fighting each other now. My props to people like Lomachenko, who a lot of black fight fans hate on. Props to him for fighting. I was just watching a clip of Nonito Donaire getting crushed by Nicholas Walters, and I had to remind myself, Lomachenko retired that guy. Lomachenko beat the brakes off of him and Guillermo Rigondeaux, and almost back to back, didn't he? He was Linares, who he knocked out with a body shot. He stayed in amateurs too long, but that guy came out and he put it out there. Teofimo fight, when he fought Teofimo, even the Haney fight, that guy needs more credit than he's getting, because in a world where the great fighters refuse to fight each other, that guy didn't refuse to fight anybody. But we didn't see enough of that. We're starting to see it now, but is it at a point now where it's too late? Because what you're seeing now are people like Spence and Crawford fight each other, but those are boxing fan fighters. And a lot of boxing fans went to see that fight or purchased the fight on pay-per-view. But it wasn't doing Mayweather, Tyson, De La Hoya numbers. And that's what Showtime and HBO always wanted from their pay-per-view numbers, to get those kind of numbers. But we've produced in the recent years fighters who are just not household names. So I think the sport is just suffering from that. And I think a lot of these networks, these big-time networks like Showtime and HBO, they said, man, we out. We're not going to do it anymore. It's just not financially worth it. Now, I know that there are promoters involved, and, ultimately, I think that boxing sinking itself, promoters fighting amongst one another, not making the fights that need to happen. And I think that people just have too much other stuff to do than just wait for a big fight to happen from some fighters they don't know. So tell me what you think. Why do you think that that Showtime's leaving boxing? Whose fault do you think it is? What do you think our next moves are as a sport? What do you think we're going to do? Where do you think we go from here? Who do you think is going to pick up the mantle and run with it? What do you think's next for boxing? Do you think this is the beginning of the end? Tell me what you guys think. Don't forget to click like and subscribe. Tell your friends that your boy Al's talking boxing and he knows what he's talking about. Put it down in the comment section. Tell me what you think about what's going on with boxing, and we can holler at each other later. Peace.